The fluorescent lights in the server room hummed their eternal song, a white noise that Marcus Chen had learned to find comforting over his 8 years at Titancore Industries. At 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, he sat cross-legged on the cold tile floor, laptop balanced on his knees, watching lines of code scroll across the screen like green rain. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, sitting abandoned on top of server rack 7, but he didn't notice. He was in the zone, that sacred space where time became irrelevant and the only thing that mattered was solving the problem in front of him. The emergency that had dragged him from his bed was a ransomware attack targeting their European division. 300 workstations compromised, and Marcus had spent the last 4 hours building a custom decryption tool, isolating infected systems and restoring backups. His fingers flew across the keyboard with the confidence of a concert pianist, each keystroke precise and purposeful. The attack had been sophisticated, but Marcus was better. He was always better. Network integrity restored, he muttered to himself, watching the final diagnostic complete. All systems nominal, threat neutralized. He allowed himself a small smile, the kind that never quite reached his eyes but carried the weight of satisfaction earned through expertise. In 8 years, he'd handled 37 major incidents like this. Titancore systems had never been down for more than 6 hours under his watch. Never. Marcus stretched his neck, hearing vertebrae pop, and glanced at his phone. 3 missed calls from his ex-wife, Sarah. Probably about their daughter Emma's school tuition again. He'd deal with it tomorrow. Today, technically. He began typing his incident report, detailing every step of the remediation process with the meticulous precision that had become his trademark. Documentation mattered. In IT security, if it wasn't documented, it never happened. The server room door opened with a pneumatic hiss, and Marcus looked up to see David Reeves, the chief information officer, standing in the doorway. David was 43 but looked older, with premature gray at his temples and permanent worry lines etched into his forehead. He'd been Marcus's boss for 6 years, and in that time they'd developed the kind of professional respect that transcended friendship. David understood that Marcus wasn't social, wasn't political, wasn't interested in climbing corporate ladders. Marcus just wanted to keep the systems running, and David had always protected him from the bureaucratic storms that occasionally swept through the IT department. "You got it contained?" David asked, stepping into the server room. He carried 2 fresh cups of coffee, one of which he handed to Marcus. "Completely neutralized. Full restoration completed 17 minutes ago. I'm just finishing the report." Marcus accepted the coffee gratefully, taking a long sip. David always remembered he took it black, no sugar. David nodded, but something in his expression made Marcus's instincts tingle. There was tension in the CIO's shoulders, a tightness around his mouth that spoke of conversations Marcus hadn't been a part of. "You saved us again," David said, but his voice carried a strange heaviness. "Do you know how much a 6-hour ransomware incident would have cost us, between system downtime, data recovery, potential ransom payment, and reputation damage? Easily $7 million. You just saved this company $7 million in a single night, Marcus." Marcus shrugged. "It's what you pay me for." "Yeah, about that." David sat down on an equipment crate, setting his coffee aside. "We need to talk." Those 4 words carried the weight of inevitability. Marcus had heard them before, in different contexts, but always with the same undertone of finality. His marriage had ended with, "We need to talk." His relationship with his father had fractured with, "We need to talk." Now, apparently, his career was about to receive the same treatment. "The merger's going through," David said quietly. "Titancore and Helix Technologies. It's official as of midnight." The announcement goes out this morning. Marcus had heard rumors, of course. Everyone had. Corporate mergers were like earthquakes. You felt the tremors long before the ground actually split open beneath your feet. But he'd been too focused on keeping the systems running to pay much attention to executive politics. "And Helix has their own IT department?" Marcus said, understanding dawning with the cold clarity of a winter morning. "They have their own everything. Their CIO, Greg Hartwell, he's taking over the combined operation. They're doing what they're calling a strategic consolidation of redundant positions." David couldn't meet Marcus's eyes. "I fought for you, Marcus. I told them about tonight, about the 37 incidents you've resolved, about your perfect uptime record. I showed them the metrics, the cost savings, everything. But Helix already has a senior security engineer. 3 of them, actually, and Hartwell's bringing his whole team over. They're keeping some of our people in junior positions, but senior roles—" David trailed off, finally looking at Marcus. "I'm so sorry." The world didn't tilt. The floor didn't drop away. Marcus felt nothing at all, which was somehow worse than feeling too much. He'd poured 8 years into Titancore. 8 years of midnight emergencies, of weekend deployments, of canceled vacations and missed birthday parties. 8 years of being the invisible guardian who kept 47,000 employees connected, productive, and secure. And now it was over, decided in a boardroom by people who'd never spent a single hour in this server room, who didn't know the difference between a firewall and a router, who couldn't write a line of code if their lives depended on it. "When?" Marcus asked. "Your official last day is Friday. HR wants to meet with you at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Today, I mean. They'll go over your severance package. It's generous, considering. 12 weeks of pay, continuation of benefits for 6 months, and a glowing reference letter. I wrote it myself." 12 weeks. They were buying him off with 12 weeks of salary after 8 years of loyalty. Marcus did the math automatically, the way his mind always did. 12 weeks at his current salary minus taxes came to roughly $48,000. He'd saved them $7 million tonight alone. The return on investment was laughable. "I'll finish the incident report," Marcus said, turning back to his laptop. "Make sure the handoff is clean." "Marcus, it's fine, David, really. I appreciate you fighting for me." His voice was flat, emotionless, the tone he'd perfected over years of suppressing everything that might make him seem less than professional. "I'll make sure everything is documented properly. Wouldn't want Hartwell's team to struggle with the transition." David stood there for a long moment, clearly wanting to say something more, but Marcus kept his eyes on the screen until he heard the pneumatic hiss of the door closing. Then, and only then, did he stop typing and just stare at the blinking cursor. 8 years. He thought about Emma, about the child support payments that would become impossible to maintain on unemployment. He thought about his studio apartment with its view of a brick wall, about his life that had somehow been reduced to work and nothing else. He thought about all the nights like this one, fixing problems while the rest of the world slept, being the invisible hero that nobody thanked, because when IT did its job right, nobody noticed at all. Something hardened in Marcus's chest, a cold crystallization of anger that he pushed down deep. He finished his incident report with the same meticulous precision he always used, uploaded it to the shared documentation system, and began the process of securing the server room for the next shift. But as he worked, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered a dangerous thought. What if they realized too late exactly what they were losing? The HR meeting at 9 a.m. was exactly as soul-crushing as Marcus expected. Carol Zhang from Human Resources sat across from him in a sterile conference room, her smile professionally sympathetic as she slid a manila folder across the table. She was maybe 30, probably good at her job, and absolutely following a script that had been used hundreds of times before. "We want you to know how much we've appreciated your contributions to Titancore," Carol said, her voice modulated to hit the perfect note between sincere and businesslike. "This decision was purely strategic and in no way reflects on your performance." Marcus didn't respond. He opened the folder and scanned the severance agreement with the same analytical precision He applied to security logs. 12 weeks of salary, benefits continuation, standard non-compete clause, non-disparagement agreement. They wanted him to sign away his right to say anything negative about the company in exchange for their generous package. The non-compete is limited to direct competitors in the cybersecurity field within a 50-mile radius, Carol continued. We think that's more than fair. And of course, there's the reference letter from David. You'll have no trouble finding another position with your skills and experience. Marcus looked up at her. What happens to my current access credentials? All system access will be revoked at close of business Friday. We'll need your badge, parking pass, and any company equipment at that time. You can use the rest of this week to wrap up any pending projects and document your work for the transition team. And my personal files? 8 years of documentation, scripts, tools I've built? Carol glanced at her notes. Personal files stored on company servers remain company property, as outlined in your employment agreement. However, you're welcome to copy any non-proprietary materials to a personal drive, subject to review by IT security. She paused, perhaps recognizing the irony of telling the senior IT security engineer that his work would be reviewed by IT security. Obviously, any materials containing sensitive company information, credentials, or proprietary systems documentation must remain on company servers. Marcus signed the document without reading the rest. He knew what it said. He'd helped write the template 5 years ago when they'd revised the employee handbook. The irony of that wasn't lost on him either. He spent the rest of Tuesday in a fog, mechanically responding to tickets, updating documentation, and avoiding eye contact with colleagues who'd already heard the news. The IT department grapevine was faster than any network he'd ever built. By lunchtime, 3 people had awkwardly offered their condolences. By mid-afternoon, everyone was avoiding him like he had something contagious. Except for Priya Sharma. Priya was one of the junior network administrators, 26 years old and brilliant in the way that reminded Marcus of himself a decade ago. She'd started at Titancore 2 years ago, and Marcus had taken her under his wing, teaching her the deep systems knowledge that no certification could provide. She found him in the server room at 4 p.m. carrying 2 sandwiches from the deli across the street. "You didn't eat lunch," she said, handing him one of the sandwiches. Turkey and Swiss on rye, the same thing he'd ordered every day. "Thanks." Marcus accepted the food but didn't unwrap it. Priya sat down on the equipment crate where David had sat the night before. "This is bullshit, Marcus. Complete bullshit. Do they have any idea what you do here, what you've built?" "They know. They just don't care." "Hartwell is an idiot. I looked him up. He's a manager, not an engineer. He's never written a line of code in his life. He's one of those guys who thinks cybersecurity is about buying expensive software and checking boxes on compliance forms." Marcus managed a thin smile. "Then he's going to love Titancore's infrastructure." "What do you mean?" He gestured at the server racks surrounding them, at the blinking lights and humming machines that were the beating heart of a 47,000-employee company. "Our infrastructure is 8 years of custom solutions, workarounds, and patches. The network topology alone is a spiderweb of VLANs, firewall rules, and routing tables that I built piece by piece. The documentation exists, but understanding it requires context, knowledge, institutional memory." "And you're the institutional memory," Priya said quietly. "I'm one of 3 people who understands the whole system. David is another, but he's transitioning out too. And the third is Randy in network operations, who's retiring in 6 weeks." Marcus finally unwrapped his sandwich and took a bite without tasting it. "Hartwell's team is going to walk into a maze without a map. They'll figure it out, eventually. It'll just take time, and probably a few painful learning experiences." Priya was quiet for a moment, and then asked, "Are you going to help them? After they fired you?" That was the question, wasn't it? The professional thing to do would be to provide comprehensive documentation, to make the transition as smooth as possible, to be the bigger person.
That's what David expected. That's what Carol from HR assumed would happen. That's what Marcus had always done, put the organization first, be the selfless IT guy who made sure everyone else could do their jobs. But something had shifted in Marcus during the long hours between the 2:47 a.m. emergency and the 9 a.m. termination. Some fundamental equation had changed. For 8 years, he'd operated under the assumption that competence and dedication would be rewarded, that making himself invaluable would ensure job security. He'd been wrong. In the corporate calculus, nobody was invaluable. Everyone was a line item, a cost to be optimized, a redundancy to be eliminated. "I'll document what I'm contractually obligated to document," Marcus said carefully. "Nothing more, nothing less." Wednesday and Thursday passed in a blur of mechanical activity. Marcus created handoff documents that were technically comprehensive but strategically incomplete. He documented the what and the how, but not the why. He provided the current state of systems, but not the historical context that explained their evolution. He created maps, but omitted the landmarks that would make navigation intuitive. He wasn't sabotaging anything, he was simply doing exactly what was required of him and nothing more. No extra mile, no additional effort, no insights born from 8 years of accumulated wisdom. If Hartwell's team was smart, they'd figure it out. If they weren't, well, that wasn't Marcus's problem anymore. On Thursday afternoon, he received an email from Greg Hartwell himself requesting a meeting Friday morning to discuss transition logistics and knowledge transfer. He stared at the email for a long moment, then replied with a single sentence. "My last day ends at 5 p.m. Friday. Any meetings should be scheduled before then." By Thursday evening, Marcus had copied all his personal scripts and tools to an encrypted external drive. Not the proprietary stuff, he wasn't a thief, but 8 years of custom code, automation scripts, and utilities he'd built in his own time, often at home, often solving problems that weren't technically his responsibility. Those belonged to him, not Titancore. Among those files was something he'd built 2 years ago and never deployed. An automated account management script he'd nicknamed Shepherd. It was designed to handle the nightmare scenario of mass account compromise, capable of systematically locking down user accounts, forcing password resets, and implementing multi-factor authentication across the entire organization in minutes rather than hours. He'd built it after a particularly nasty phishing attack and had kept it updated just in case. Marcus looked at the Shepherd script for a long time that Thursday night. Sitting in his apartment with a beer he wasn't really drinking. The script was elegant, efficient, and devastating in its scope. With the right parameters, it could lock down the entire company, every single account, in the time it took to run a database query. He wasn't going to deploy it. That would be criminal, a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and probably a dozen other laws. It would destroy any chance of future employment in the IT field, might result in jail time, and would definitely give Titancore grounds to void his severance agreement and possibly sue him into bankruptcy. But the fact that he could do it, that he had that power at his fingertips, provided a strange comfort. For 8 years, he'd been the guardian. Now, for this brief moment before his access was revoked, he was something else entirely. He was the shepherd who could scatter the flock with a single command. Marcus finished his beer and went to bed, leaving the laptop open on his coffee table, the shepherd script still displayed on the screen like a loaded gun lying on a table. Friday morning arrived with gray skies and the promise of rain. Marcus dressed in his usual uniform, khaki pants, button-down shirt, comfortable shoes, and made the commute
to Titancore's headquarters one last time. The security guard at the front desk, Miguel, gave him a sad smile as he scanned his badge. "Heard it's your last day, Marcus. That's rough, man. You've always been good to us." "Thanks, Miguel. Take care of yourself." The elevator ride to the 7th floor felt longer than usual. Marcus stepped out into the IT department's domain, a landscape of cubicles and glass-walled conference rooms that had been his professional home for 8 years. A few people looked up as he passed, but most kept their eyes on their screens, the universal signal of awkward avoidance. David was waiting at Marcus's cubicle, looking like he hadn't slept well. Hartwell wants to meet at 10. He's bringing his team leads. They want to go through the system's architecture and documentation. Fine. Marcus sat down at his desk and booted up his workstation. He had 8 hours left, and he intended to use them exactly as specified in his job description, maintaining system security and integrity. The meeting at 10 was excruciating. Greg Hartwell was everything Marcus had expected, based on Priya's research. Mid-40s, expensive suit, perfectly styled hair, and the confident ignorance of someone who'd spent more time in boardrooms than server rooms. He brought 3 team leads with him, all carrying tablets and wearing expressions of barely concealed superiority. "Marcus, thanks for making time," Hartwell said, as if Marcus had any choice in the matter. "I've been reviewing your documentation, and I have to say it's quite comprehensive, really thorough work." "Thank you. My team has some questions about the implementation specifics. The network segmentation strategy seems unconventional. Why are the financial systems isolated on a separate VLAN with such restrictive firewall rules?" He could have explained that Titancore had been targeted by state-sponsored actors 3 years ago, specifically going after financial data, and that the segmentation strategy had been developed in response to threat intelligence from the FBI. He could have walked them through the risk analysis, the compliance requirements, and the security architecture that had kept them safe ever since. Instead, he said, "It's documented in the Security Architecture Overview, Section 7.3, I believe." Hartwell frowned slightly. "Yes, I read that section. I was hoping for more context, the rationale behind the decision." "The rationale is security best practices, defense in depth, limiting the attack surface." "But specifically, if you need historical context, David can probably help with that. I documented current state and implementation details, which is what was requested." Marcus kept his voice professionally neutral, but he saw David wince slightly. The meeting continued in that vein for 90 minutes. Greg Hartwell's team asked questions that Marcus answered with technically accurate but strategically minimal responses. He wasn't being dishonest. He wasn't withholding critical security information. He was simply providing exactly the level of detail that his job description required and nothing more. By 11:30, Hartwell's frustration was evident. "This is going to be more challenging than anticipated," he said, looking at his team leads. "Marcus, I'm going to need you to be available for consultation after your official end date. We can arrange a contractor agreement, reasonable hourly rate. What do you say?" Marcus had been waiting for this. "I'm afraid that won't be possible. The severance agreement includes a non-compete clause that would complicate any consulting arrangement. You'd need to talk to HR about modifying the terms." "I see." Hartwell's jaw tightened. "Well, we'll make it work. I'm sure your documentation is sufficient once we've had time to fully digest it." After they left, David pulled Marcus aside. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Am I? I'm providing exactly what was requested, comprehensive documentation of current systems and implementation details. That's what's in my job description, David. That's what I've spent the last 3 days creating." "You know what I mean. The institutional knowledge, the context, the why behind the why."
That's not in my job description. And as of 5 p.m. today, I won't be an employee anymore. If Hartwell wants that level of knowledge transfer, he should have planned better. Or not fired the person who had it. Marcus immediately regretted the sharpness in his voice. "I'm sorry, that wasn't fair to you." David sighed. "No, you're right. This whole thing is a clusterfuck, and you're the one paying the price for executive decisions you had no part in making." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What are you going to do after today?" "Figure it out, update my resume, start looking for positions." He paused. "Spend some time with Emma. I've missed a lot of her life because I was always here. You're a good father, Marcus, and you're a hell of an engineer. Any company would be lucky to have you." They both knew that wasn't quite true. Marcus was 41 years old, over-specialized in legacy systems, and about to have a gap in his employment history that would need explaining. But David meant well, so Marcus just nodded. He spent the afternoon responding to tickets, fixing minor issues, and watching the clock crawl toward 5 p.m. At 4:30, Carol from HR appeared with his separation paperwork and a banker's box for his personal items. The ritual of the terminated employee, walked through countless times throughout corporate history. Marcus packed his box with 8 years' worth of accumulated debris, a coffee mug that said, "There's no place like 127.0.0.1, a stress ball shaped like a server, 3 technical manuals he'd bought with his own money, and a framed photo of Emma from 2 years ago. His desk looked anonymous once it was cleared, ready for whoever would sit there next. At 4:45 p.m., Marcus logged out of his workstation for the last time. His credentials would be revoked at 5, but he didn't want to be sitting there when it happened. Didn't want to experience that final severing of connection. He picked up his box and headed for the elevator. Priya caught him at the elevator bank. "I'm sorry, Marcus. This is wrong." "It's business. I'll be fine." "Will you, though?" She looked at him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You've given everything to this place, and they just threw you away." Marcus didn't have an answer for that. The elevator arrived, and he stepped inside, turning to face her as the doors began to close. "Take care of yourself, Priya, and document everything. Trust me on that. Always document everything." The doors closed on her concerned face, and Marcus descended alone. Saturday morning, Marcus woke up in his apartment to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. His phone had been on silent, and apparently, something had gone catastrophically wrong at Titancore. The first message was from David, time-stamped at 6:17 a.m. "Marcus, call me immediately. Emergency situation." The second was at 6:22 a.m. "Marcus, this is critical. Something's locked down the entire network. Nobody can log in." The third was at 6:29 a.m. "Hartwell's team is completely lost. We need your help. This is bad. Really bad." Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, phone in hand, and a cold dread settled into his stomach. He hadn't deployed Shepard. He was certain of it. He'd gone to sleep Thursday night with the script on his screen, woken up, closed the laptop, and gone to work on Friday. He hadn't executed anything. But the universe had a cruel sense of irony. He opened his laptop and logged into Titancore's VPN using his personal credentials. He'd kept a backup account for remote support, technically against policy, but practically necessary. Except his credentials didn't work. He tried his administrative account, also locked. He tried the emergency break glass account that only he and David knew about, locked. Every single account was locked. Marcus's hands were shaking as he went through his laptop's command history, checking timestamps, checking logs, checking everything. There, Thursday night, 11:47 p.m., a command execution. The Shepard script, with parameters set to lock down all user accounts across the entire Active Directory infrastructure. He hadn't done it. He was certain he hadn't. But the logs said otherwise. The log said that at 11:47 p.m. on Thursday, Marcus Chen had executed a script that locked 47,000 employee accounts, effectively shutting down the entire company. Except he'd been asleep. He remembered going to bed around 11:15, remembered turning off his lights, remembered lying in the dark, thinking about Emma and severance pay and an uncertain future. Then Marcus noticed something in the logs.
The execution wasn't from his laptop. It was from a remote session originating from inside Titancore's network. Someone had remote accessed his workstation, his actual workstation at the office, after he'd left for the day, found the Shepard script in his document folder where he'd saved it, and executed it. Someone had framed him. His phone rang. David. Marcus answered. "Marcus, what the hell did you do?" "I didn't do anything. I was asleep when—" "The logs show your account executed a lockdown script at 11:47 Thursday night. Every single employee account is locked. Nobody can access email, systems, applications, nothing. The company is completely shut down. Hartwell is losing his mind. Security is talking about pressing charges. Marcus, they think you sabotaged the company." "David, listen to me. I was home asleep. Someone remote accessed my workstation and ran a script from there. I need to see the complete logs. I can prove—" "You can't access anything, Marcus. Your credentials are revoked. And even if you could, you'd be tampering with evidence. The FBI is already involved. This is a federal crime." The FBI. Federal crime. Marcus felt his world tilting. "I didn't do this, David. You have to believe me. Someone set me up." "Who? Why?" "Marcus, you were angry. You had means, motive, and opportunity. You built the script. Your account executed it. And the timing. The day after your last day." David's voice cracked. "I want to believe you. I really do. But the evidence— Look at the remote access logs. Look at who was in the building Thursday night. Look at—" "Marcus, stop. Don't say anything else. Get a lawyer right now. Don't talk to anyone. Don't access any Titancore systems. Don't do anything until you have legal representation. Do you understand?" Marcus understood. He understood that someone had systematically destroyed his life with elegant precision. They'd used his own tool, his own account, his own workstation. They'd timed it perfectly, right after his termination, when anger would be assumed, when motive would be obvious. "Who's on Hartwell's team?" Marcus asked quietly. "What?" "Who did Hartwell bring with him from Helix? What are their names?" "Marcus, don't—" "Who, David?" A long pause. Then, "Stephen Kessler, Senior Security Engineer, Monica Diaz, Network Operations Lead, and James Vickers, Chief Security Architect." Another pause. "Vickers was in the building Thursday night. I saw him when I left around 10. He said he was familiarizing himself with the infrastructure." James Vickers. Marcus pulled up LinkedIn on his laptop, searching for the name. Found him. 52 years old, 25 years in IT. Currently Chief Security Architect at Helix Technologies. Previously at 3 other companies, all of which had gone through similar mergers. Marcus couldn't access it himself. His accounts were all locked, but Priya could, if she could get physical access to a server in the data center and boot it into maintenance mode. It would take technical expertise, nerves of steel, and a willingness to potentially violate company policy. "I'll need to get past security," Priya said. "They've locked down the building. Nobody's supposed to be in there except Hartwell's team. Miguel is working the front desk today. Tell him you left your purse in the data center yesterday. He knows you, knows you're not involved in this mess. Get to server rack 7, the one with the red tag. Boot the system into maintenance mode using the instructions I'm about to send you. Execute the unlock sequence. It'll take about 15 minutes total. And if I get caught, then we're both screwed. But Priya, I didn't do this.
and whoever did is going to get away with it unless we act now, while they're still scrambling to deal with the crisis. He heard her take a deep breath. Send me the instructions. While Priya drove to the office, Marcus continued his investigation. He'd been thinking about the timing of the attack, the precision of it. Vickers would have needed administrative access to create the remote connection, would have needed to know about the Shepard script's existence, would have needed to understand Marcus's documentation well enough to deploy it correctly. That meant he'd accessed Marcus's files, his personal files. Marcus pulled up his laptop's audit logs, and there it was, Thursday afternoon, 3:47 p.m., while Marcus was in meetings with Hartwell. A remote access session from an administrator account accessing his documents folder, copying files. Vickers had literally stolen his work and then used it to destroy him. But he'd made one mistake. He'd copied the files to his own network share before executing the script. It was a small slip, the kind of detail that a careful investigator would notice. Vickers had wanted to keep a copy of the weapon for future reference, and that copy would have his digital fingerprints all over it. Marcus's phone buzzed. Priya, I'm in. Found the server. Starting the process. For 15 minutes, Marcus sat in his apartment, staring at his phone, counting seconds. He imagined Priya in the cold server room, fingers flying over the keyboard, executing commands that would either save them or damn them both. He heard her take a deep breath. Send me the instructions. While Priya drove to the office, Marcus continued his investigation. He had been thinking about the timing of the attack, the precision of it. Vickers would have needed administrative access to create the remote connection, would have needed to know about the Shepard script's existence, would have needed to understand Marcus's documentation well enough to deploy it correctly. That meant he'd accessed Marcus's files, his personal files. Marcus pulled up his laptop's audit logs, and there it was, Thursday afternoon, 3:47 p.m., while Marcus was in meetings with Hartwell. A remote access session from an administrator account accessing his documents folder, copying files. Vickers had literally stolen his work and then used it to destroy him. But he'd made one mistake. He'd copied the files to his own network share before executing the script. It was a small slip, the kind of detail that a careful investigator would notice. Vickers had wanted to keep a copy of the weapon for future reference, and that copy would have his digital fingerprints all over it. Marcus's phone buzzed. Priya, I'm in. Found the server. Starting the process. For 15 minutes, Marcus sat in his apartment, staring at his phone, counting seconds. He imagined Priya in the cold server room, fingers flying over the keyboard, executing commands that would either save them or damn them both. He heard her take a deep breath. Send me the instructions. The aftermath took 3 weeks to fully unfold. The FBI investigation moved slowly at first, slowed by corporate lawyers and jurisdictional questions, but Marcus's evidence package had provided a roadmap that even the most skeptical investigator couldn't ignore. The audit logs told a story that was impossible to refute. James Vickers had systematically accessed Marcus's files, copied his tools, created a remote access session, and deployed the Shepard script from Marcus's workstation while Marcus was provably at home, asleep. Vickers' mistake had been his efficiency. He had done everything in one afternoon and left a clear trail of digital breadcrumbs. And he'd done it